Jersey in the house. I know we do. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christy Kobus-Rokicki, and I am the Vice President of External Affairs for NSLA. Thank you. My entire personal and professional life has been shaped by every constituency in this room, and it is an honor and a privilege to be with you and come home with you in DC every year at this Summer Learning Summit. One of my earliest core memories is going to library school with my mom at the Hillside Public Library for story time and to check out books like The Lonely Doll and The Berenstain Bears, and eventually my beloved Judy Blume. How could you not? This instilled a foundational, lifelong love of reading and joyful learning in me. It is with great joy that I introduce someone whose work I admire and who has made an incredible impact on the way we think about technology, creativity, and life in the digital age. Manoush Zomorodi is a journalist and a podcaster, and she is the author of Bored and Brilliant, a book that opened my eyes to the hidden potential of boredom and how stepping back can fuel our creativity and well-being. As a mother of 2 young adults, I can tell you Manoush's insights have been transformational for my family. Her work shows us how to navigate our connected world in both practical and meaningful actions, and it will inspire and empower us all. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Manoush Zomorodi.
Oh, here we go. Hello, my gazelles. Are you guys tired of being told how awesome you are? Or are you like, no, bring it more, please? Because you are. When Aaron told me that you guys were having this event days after the election, I was like, they're insane. And now I've decided that you're actually geniuses, because I have learned so much over the last 24 hours. I've learned about an exchange program between blue and red states. I love this idea of not fixing the system, but building the ecosystem. And I have learned that being in a room full of people who care about kids is the place you want to be after a major US election. So, thank you. Okay, now let's get to work, okay? We are gonna be talking about the mind-body-tech connection, and I do wanna add a couple things. I am the mother of 2 teenagers, a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I'm going through perimenopause. So any brain farts that happen, you will forgive me. I also don't get out of my radio studio very often, so this is weird. So I've been a journalist for over 30 years, but about a decade ago, I got into podcasting, and I fell into a rabbit hole that I have yet to dig myself out of. I have spent the last, we can do this, we can do the technology. Right, guys? You promised me. All right, I'm just gonna click it, and then you're gonna forward it to the pink slide. I have spent the last 10 years trying to untangle how technology is changing how we think, how we learn, and how we move. And I have been trying to figure out what happens when our ancient biology collides with modern technology. And as part of that, I have gotten tens of thousands of people to experiment with their behavior to try and find the right balance between their tech and their human capabilities. So some of the things I'm about to tell you, you may have heard before, others might be new to you. I've caught snippets of all of this in some of the workshops that I've gone to today, but my hope today is to bring this all kind of together in a way and give you some ideas about how we can help kids thrive in an era of screens and endless information. And also, wow, you guys have a lot of responsibility is the other thing I've learned. This is also for you, okay? Because we need all this wonderful technology, but we need to use it without sacrificing our mental and physical health. So for me, this all goes back to about 17 and a half years ago when, going back one, oh, it's not there. Oh yes, that was 17 and a half years ago, 2007. That was the year that the iPhone was born, late June actually. And in early June that year, I became a mother. That was the year my son was born. I know, so cute there. So after he got a little older and I got an iPhone, I was so scared to become a mom because I'd been this hard-hitting journalist, and I was like, how am I gonna do this? And I really thought, you guys, I was like, well, I'll just put him in a backpack and we'll go. Such bullshit. He was so colicky, it was awful. But then I got an iPhone and I could take him to the playground and also be on my phone, which actually doesn't sound very good now when I say it, but I could also Google, like, when is story time? It was amazing to me that I had my first child at a moment when technology made it so much easier for me to be a working parent. But then, you know, always great, first blush on the rose. A few years later, I'd had another kid. I'd really started to ramp up my career. I went to New York Public Radio. I was doing this podcast about the tech economy in New York City. Things were going really well. And I just something was off. I started feeling like I couldn't pay attention or really concentrate. I started having trouble coming up with ideas for new shows. And I described it this way last night. I will describe it again. I felt like there was sand in my brain. And I just really wanted to understand and pinpoint what was happening now to me that hadn't been happening previously. And I started to wonder if it was because of all the little dull moments in my day, instead of letting my mind wander and thinking about things while I waited in line for the subway or for my coffee, what did I do? I looked at my phone, because why would you stare into space if you could plan a play date, or you could catch up on the headlines, or tell your husband to figure out dinner? I grew up with the saying, only boring people get bored, but I started to think, well, maybe getting rid of boredom was actually a problem. But I wanted to understand more, like, what actually happens in our brains when we get bored. And I interviewed lots of neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists, and there's a whole area of mind wandering that they study, and they explain that when we get bored and allow our minds to wander, we ignite a network in the brain called the default mode. This is a neural network where our most original thinking and problem solving happens. It is also where we do something called autobiographical planning. This is telling yourself the story of you. Where have you been? Where are you now? Where are you going? But we can't tap this awesome brain power if we are constantly tapping our screens. So I explained this to all my listeners, and I asked them, would they be interested in experimenting with their digital habits for a week and maybe getting bored on purpose to see if what we would do. And I thought a couple hundred people would sign up, but within 48 hours, 20,000 people signed up. And we called it the Bored and Brilliant Project. And together we tried all kinds of things. We tried keeping our phones off our bodies for a day, putting it in one place and going to actually check it rather than taking it with us everywhere. We tried taking no pictures for a day. Even if we saw something amazing, just seeing what it was like to look at something. We also included a lot of the science, because there is research about what taking photos all day does to your memory of experiencing your life. We also tried deleting our apps off our phone just for the day to try and take back those spare moments that we were filling with technology. Now today, this might all sound kind of basic, as the kids would say. But remember, this was a decade ago, before there were apps to even track your screen time, before it was decent table manners to leave your phone off the table, before online influencers regularly freaked out and took screen sabbaticals. We were at the forefront of this conversation. TikTok didn't even get released till 2016. And I think people still really need to hear this, and I think young people in particular are kind of surprised at the message. I want to play a video for you that I recently did for NPR's Instagram video that got millions of views. The irony is not lost on me that it was on Instagram, but let's play it anyway.
Hi, are you on Instagram right now because otherwise you'd be bored? Well, there's something you should know. Getting bored can actually be really good for you, because when you get bored and you allow your mind to wander, you use a network in your brain called the default mode. And in the default mode, your mind does some of its most creative and original thinking, the best problem solving. It also does something called autobiographical planning. That's when you look back at your life, you take note of the highs and lows, you tell yourself a story of who you are and why you're sitting here right now, and then you look into the future and envision what could be. Basically, getting bored can help you figure out your life. So the next time you reach for your phone, maybe try sitting there staring into space. Daydream a little. It's not doing nothing.
So these days, we all talk about losing our ability to concentrate, and the research supports that. Take our attention span. We used to shift our attention while we were working about every 3 minutes. Now it's estimated we do that every 45 seconds. Research also shows that when we are interrupted, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to get back to what we were originally working on. And when we are constantly interrupted, we work faster to compensate for the time lost. And what happens when we work too fast? We get frustrated, we rush, we make mistakes. Homework becomes impossible to complete. Reading for pleasure, never heard of it. So when we answer a text or we get a ping while we're working on something, I think sometimes, yes, we are being productive, but other times we are just being reactive. And I think we often confuse productivity with reactivity. Ask a teenager to tell the difference between a text that would be nice to respond to and a text they have to respond to. Yeah, no, there is no difference. And we adults struggle with it too. But here's the thing, adults, at least some of us of a certain age, remember when we felt like we could read several chapters in a row, when we could go for a walk without having to listen to something. For kids, finding ways to purposefully block out interruptions, this now has to be taught. I have heard from countless educators who have told me that they need to teach other things to their students that they didn't have to teach a decade ago. Human things like having a conversation, listening to each other, having eye contact, thinking about the thing that they just consumed. All of us are constantly checking text messages, social media posts, Netflix shows, newsletters, breaking news, podcasts. Add a wild election season to the mix, and many of us are feeling more overloaded than ever. And there's actually a word for this, a word that has been around for centuries, believe it or not. It's called infomania. It's defined as the compulsive desire to obsessively read and get news and information. Obviously, the way that we've been getting that information has been changing. Here's how one young woman explained it to me. She said, I want to read all these articles about everything from the latest scientifically engineered sugar substitute to an in-depth analysis of the latest political crisis. It is like a different flavor of FOMO. It's fear of missing out, but missing out on content and on knowledge. I mean, curiosity, that's a wonderful thing, but it can be too much because we are not machines. We need time to process. Daniel Levitin is a professor of psychology and neuroscience, and he's the author of a great book called The Organized Mind. And he told me, you can only make a certain number of decisions before you deplete your brain's capacity to make good decisions. And part of the problem is just constantly sorting through the mountains of information we're dealing with every day. Should I read this? Should I respond? Is this worth reading? Is this real? Is a new question we have to ask. And one thing he agrees that can make a big difference is something that I like to think of as single tasking. Doing one thing at a time. The opposite of multitasking. Not looking at email as you listen to a conference call or a talk at an NSLA gathering. Don't text someone while you're also answering email. Just listen to the call. Just respond to the email. Just look at the slightly neurotic woman standing in front of you giving a talk. One woman who decided to commit herself to single tasking, she was a college student, and she said, I really noticed I would reach for my phone for distraction when what I really needed to do was process everything. Single tasking helped me to handle things as they came at me, and I allowed myself to work through things instead of becoming overwhelmed and giving up. Sounds pretty simple, right? She also told me she had to cry in the parking lot of a Whole Foods and that she felt a lot better afterwards. People tell me amazing things. So that brings us back to bored and brilliant. In the end, we had 20,000 participants. It was all across the nation. 90% of our participants cut down on their minutes, but to me, the stories said so much more than the data. One young guy wrote me and said, I feel like I am waking up from a mental hibernation. I actually pick up my guitar more and I'm sleeping better. People said they were calmer, they solved nagging problems, they finished their college thesis, looking at you, Nabila, and they just generally felt better. And honestly, all I did was give people permission to like think about things and reflect. This is not like rocket science, it's not exactly groundbreaking. But to me, I think the secret sauce is combining a little history, a little science, a little economics, and community to make people curious about what was happening to them and then experimenting together, making it a safe place. Also, not bad-mouthing technology and making people feel guilty too much. I wrote a book about all of this, and when I went on book tour, a lot of parents would bring their teens with them, and many of them said, like, I don't know what you mean by this boredom thing. I really honestly have no idea what you're talking about. Like, and whenever I feel weird, I just look at my phone. I was like, okay, so, we have to introduce this concept. And another person, many of them actually said, I don't want to do this because I don't want to be alone with myself. And to be clear, it is true, boredom is not all great. It can trigger unpleasant thought patterns, including rumination, going around and around in your mind. Why did I say that? I should have said this. Did I hurt their feelings? It can make you think that you've made mistakes, make you really wonder about what's going to happen. It can be scary, right? But learning to calm yourself is another vital human skill. And what happens when we don't have that skill? We are anxious, maybe depressed. And if we can accept and get used to uncomfortable issues coming up, boredom can be a gateway to what's called positive constructive daydreaming when we use our imagination to envision possibility. And that is what we need kids to do, right? Aaron quoted Marian Wright Edelman this morning, the founder and president of the Children's Defense Fund this morning. You can't be what you can't see. Now, she was referring to having role models, but I think this applies to kids being able to picture themselves, to imagine themselves doing something amazing in the future too. Therapists, teachers, parents still ping me regularly on social media. Also ironic, I know, but they tell me that reframing boredom and implementing simple strategies really helps their clients, their kids, and their own mental health. Okay, so I want to talk about another historic year in technology. That was the year of 2020 when the pandemic happened and our lives were Zoomified. That's the technical term. That is when I think a new kind of information overload developed. As more and more of us worked virtually, we went from back-to-back Zoom calls with no commute or break to think about the conversations we just had. We went from online parent-teacher conferences to Q3 planning without so much as a bathroom break. And we all know what we felt like physically, and many of us still feel like. Even if you love your job, we step away from our desks at the end of the day wrecked. We've got blurry eyesight, an eyelid flitter that won't go away. I'll speak for myself. Achy backs, wrists, hunched shoulders, necks. We feel simultaneously overstimulated and exhausted with just enough energy to slither over to the couch to look at Netflix or scroll some more or both at the same time. And as the pandemic started to fade, all sorts of questions were running through my head. Like, if I've been on a screen all day, why don't I want to spring up from my chair at the end of the day and run out and see the world? We've all heard that sitting is the new smoking, but what is it about being a knowledge worker or information worker that makes us feel so zapped and unfocused? My theory was that somehow our digital habits were disrupting this conversation between our physical and mental systems, leaving us feeling off kilter and like crap. That's also the medical term for that. And then I read a study. In 2003, Keith Diaz, an associate professor of behavioral medicine at Columbia University Medical Center, published this scientific paper. In his exercise lab, they found that just 5 minutes of movement every half hour during periods of prolonged sitting can offset some of the most harmful effects on a person's health. Not working out at the gym in the morning, not a standing desk. I was really intrigued. I was like, maybe this is the answer. And I decided to go to his lab and try it out for myself and recruit some listeners to join me. I'm going to play you a video that explains more.
What's the least amount of exercise you can do so sitting on your butt all day doesn't eventually kill you? I took part in a study where one day I sat at a desk and worked on my laptop for 8 hours straight. Then another day, I took 5-minute strolls every half hour. Compare the walking day to the sitting day, and it's kind of amazing. My blood sugar was cut nearly in half. My blood pressure was down 5 points, and my mood, it was way better. The researchers have found that this, just moving gently for 5 minutes every half hour, does the trick. Not working out in the morning or getting a standing desk, not if you're gonna sit and look at a screen all day. The question is, can we integrate these little interruptions into our lives outside of the lab? Well, we're gonna try. Click NPR's link in bio to sign up for the Body Electric Project to help out researchers to see if we can actually change our habits. The deadline is Sunday, October 8th at 11:59 p.m., but you can listen to the series anytime.
So this was one of the most watched videos on the NPR Instagram, which has, 7-8 million followers, and 23,000 people signed up to take part in a clinical trial with Columbia. We actually had to close the signups because we crashed the servers. And I think, why should I be surprised this time that the project was so popular? 92% of all jobs require digital skills. Nearly 85% of jobs in the US are now sedentary. And for kids, one recent study estimates that globally, 1 out of 5 kids meets the recommended levels of physical activity. In the US, only 9% of kids get all 3 of the recommended amounts of sleep, screen time, and physical activity. And that number gets worse as kids get older. The World Health Organization estimates that if we keep up with this sedentary lifestyle, nearly 500 million people will develop heart disease, obesity, diabetes, or other diseases this decade, costing governments $27 billion annually. Movement has become an inconvenience. We can call an Uber, order Seamless. How annoying is it when you leave your charger upstairs? And Keith Diaz from Columbia explained to me exactly why sitting is so bad. And I would like to share what he told me because it really shook me up. I didn't really understand what the problem was. So think of sitting like this vacuum tube. When you kink the tube, things stop flowing, right? Well, it's the same with your legs when you sit. You put a bend in your arteries at the knee, blood pools in your legs, and now new research suggests that this can damage the inner lining of your blood vessels in your muscles. To regulate the blood sugar and fat in your bloodstream, these muscles have to be used. They need to be contracted and stimulated, and if they're not used, over time you expose your body to higher blood sugar and higher blood pressure levels. And researchers say that's when things get serious. You will start developing hypertension and diabetes earlier, which can ultimately decrease your lifespan and increase your risk for things like cancer and heart disease. This is happening. In the last 20 years alone, the rate of young people with type 2 diabetes has doubled. Early onset cancer is predicted to jump by 30% this decade. So, some good news. Let's go back to the Body Electric Challenge. Boop. I'm going to go back again. 60% of people ultimately were able to stick with it. We divided them into 3 cohorts, 5 minutes either half hour, every hour, or every 2 hours, and report back. And our goal was not just to see what success looked like, but why people failed as well. So 60% stuck with it. These were the big findings that people reported that breaks improved their mental health. They felt more positive. They felt less stress. But here was the big surprise. Breaks didn't hurt their job performance. On the days they took breaks, people said they actually felt more engaged with their work, 25% less fatigued, and rated the quality of their work as higher. Was it easy to embrace these interruptions? No, but it was possible, and it was worth it. This is one of the people who did it, who also is an infographic artist. She made this for me. Tells some of the stories. One woman loved moving so much she quit her desk job. Another told me that her blood pressure went down 40 points from before the project, and her doctor thinks she can go off her insulin. We heard from people who did it with their work from home buddies, people who just got moving at their desks, people who decided to be outside more. And here's what I find so fascinating. A lot of people told me that when they started the project, they would set timers, right? Because they couldn't remember, they'd get so into something. But after a while, they started to tune into what their bodies were telling them. They didn't need the timers anymore. They began to know instinctively that they needed to move and started to want to move. And so I have been thinking, how do we translate this into feedback that we can give to our kids, right? So I think we can start when they're little. Have you ever seen the Wong-Baker Faces Pain Rating Scale? This is something that nurses will show to kids in the emergency room and ask them to point to the one that shows how they're feeling. Well, let's make a screen scale one, right? Like, name how you feel after screen time, because when my kids were younger, they were little assholes after spending too much time on the iPad. And as they get older, let me tell you, it is not getting better. So what if we incorporated a screen scale into our lives to help us have conversations about how screen time makes us physically feel if we get too much of it? This is not on or off. Let's help kids find their screen time sweet spot, because it is there. For the teens, I think we can get a little more scientific about it. I want people to talk more about interoception. This is how we make sense of all the signals our body sends us. We, learn that if we get hot and sweaty, we should take off our jacket, right? If our heart is racing, depending on the context, that could mean we're really anxious or we're excited or both. So we take deep breaths to calm down. But have you ever been so consumed by what's on your screen that you have forgotten to use the bathroom or discovered that your foot was asleep? I have, many times. Our technology can distract us from noticing these really important signals that are coming from the brain. We scroll for hours, not paying attention to how tired we are or how unhappy or anxious the content we are taking in is making us feel. And I want to give you a very extreme example of this happening. So you may remember back in 2021, thousands of teens around the world started showing Tourette's-like symptoms. Really violent, severe ticking that sent many of them to the hospital. The outbreak was eventually traced back to TikTok, where a series of videos about ticks were going viral. I mean, it was a mystery to be solved because the ticks went away almost as soon as they appeared. But the latest thinking now is that for a certain group of teens, it won't surprise you that it was young women, going through adolescence during a pandemic and spending lots of time online and looking at these videos brewed up kind of the perfect storm and affected them in a very physical way. Many researchers are trying to understand how mental health problems impact us physically. And one neuroscientist I talked to who specializes in interoception told me that one of the most effective ways to cope with information overload and the physical effects is to give yourself a sensory reset. So he is specifically studying the effects of floats. Have you heard of these? They're like a salt bath. You go in and you do absolutely nothing. The idea is total sensory deprivation. He is seeing really promising results with people who are, especially young women who have eating disorders. If you can't take a float, he suggests just lie in a dark room, no dog, no music, nothing, just be. So that's about helping young people tune into their bodies and giving themselves timeouts from technology. But now let's think about learning and movement. I have learned a lot in the last 24 hours. And a teacher has told me we are training our children from the moment they enter the school doors that sitting and listening and focusing and being sedentary is part of success. I know summer, many of you see this very, very differently, and I have a lot to learn from all of you. But we also visited a progressive elementary school here in DC that can give us a glimpse of what the alternative could look like. So the River School has no desks. A third of their day is spent moving. And all this movement isn't just about exercise. The curriculum includes teaching kids to feel their breathing, pay attention to how they're feeling. They also do math basketball, which I learned a lot more about at the math and movement session today. It was great. And as one fourth grader put it, it's so much more interesting than just doing busy work and sitting in a chair. And yes, this model works because the school has a lot of resources and small class sizes. And I know many of you are already thinking about how to combine movement and learning. And I think more people need to get the message that integrating physical activity into kids' lives all day long is worthwhile, not just competitive sports or gym class once or twice a week. We are always asking kids or telling them, you've had too much screen time. That's too much screen time. What if we said to them, did you get in your movement time today? Did you get enough scroll time? Stroll time, not scroll time. Okay, I want to conclude by talking about you, not just how awesome you are. I know you guys love your jobs. That has been made abundantly clear. And I'm sure you also appreciate, there's been so many conversations about integrating data and partnership and all of these things, and staying connected across this vast country requires digital tools. But we, the American people, need you not to burn out. So during the workday, I want you to think of yourself as an information athlete. Just like a professional dancer or a professional pilot, you need to regulate your body in order to do your best work. So I want you to try moving during the most inappropriate times for the benefit of blood flow and America, actually, and encouraging other people to move too. Can we do that right now, please? If you are able, please get up. If you are not, use your arms or whatever works for you. And here's the beauty of it. You can go like this. This counts. A slow walk counts. 2 miles per hour. You can march in place. You can get some chores done around the house. You can take a mini dance break like we did at the beginning of today. I would encourage you to schedule 55-minute meetings instead of 60-minute meetings. Walk around the house. Yeah, you were had a screw in this morning. That was an amazing way to start the day. All right, this is just a taste. I would love to take you out into the streets of Washington and go for a big walk straight to the White House, but we're not going to do that. So take a seat for a minute if you would, because we still live in a world where sitting is the default. Thank you for doing that. So here's the gist of it. Oh my God, we've unleashed an incredible... All right, y'all in the back, take a seat. Schedule 55-minute meetings instead of 60-minute meetings. Make it okay for people to get up in the middle of a Zoom and just go back and forth, side to side. Or some days, take off the video and just go for a walk while you all talk. Talk it over with your teams. What works for all of you? That's the conversation that we need to start having. We reboot our laptops every so often. Well, our kids and us, we need to reboot ourselves too. And I think, to me, the relief is to learn that doing these things, taking breaks, making time for mind wandering and movement, they will actually make you more efficient and productive and happier. So this is a picture of one of my favorite summers. And this sense of losing time and not knowing what day it is what defined my summer as a child. I know my kids don't get that. Most kids don't anymore. So what we can do, though, is give them some time and space to condone it, to say, go and let your mind wander. I have had a parent who's like, their kid goes to take a bath and is like, I'm headed for the default mode. Great. Call it something. Make space for it. It's the negative space. Get in there. Let's be there for them if they need to talk through what comes up, right? Because it can be uncomfortable. but also let's get out of their way if creativity just comes busting through and they come up with some wild ideas. I think technology is so great in so many ways, but we need to turn our technology back into the tool it is supposed to be rather than the taskmaster that it has become. By reframing our relationship with our tools and paying more attention to our human needs, we can reclaim our physical and mental health, one movement snack and one dull walk at a time. So thank you so much, and if you were bored during my talk, I'm so glad. That's awesome. Thank you. And you guys, because you gotta meet people where they are, can we do a selfie? Is that cool? Okay. Wait, should I ask you to be really bored? No, I think you should all be moving. Okay, hang on. Move, somehow, do something. Yeah. You guys really are the best, and thank you for being the most incredible gazelles in our lives. We really appreciate it.